Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar, Discover Our Curious Functional Flowers. So thank you all for being here today. So my name is Aurélie da Silva, Marketing Manager at Limagrain Ingredient, and I will be presenting this webinar with my colleague, Florence Fossadier, Strategic Account Manager. So due to a last-minute problem, our colleague Anne-Sophie will unfortunately not be able to join us. So we do apologize for the inconvenience. So taking a look at the agenda today, so we will have a brief presentation of our company and of the market trends for snack products. Then we will present you our range of solutions for snack seasoning carriers, and of course, illustrate everything with an example using our rice functional flour as a carrier. And as always, we will end this webinar with a Q&A session. So just a quick reminder, so all the attendees are on mute, but you can of course send us your question through the chat. So it's the tab question that is on the right side of your screen. So we will answer to the questions at the end of the webinar, and if we don't have time to do so, then we will get back to you personally. So as explained, due to the absence of our colleague, even though do not hesitate to send us your question that might be specific technical questions or R&D related questions. And if we can answer them today, then we will get back to you later with our colleague Anne-Sophie. And as always, the presentation will of course be sent after the webinar. So now let's start with a brief introduction of our company, Limagrain Ingredient. So Limagrain Ingredient is actually a subsidiary of the French cooperative Limagrain, which is present in more than 56 countries all over the world. So there's actually 1,500 farmers that are part of this cooperative and produce mainly wheat and maize grains and seeds. So with progress and innovation at heart, Limagrain invests 16% of its turnover in R&D to develop the agriculture of tomorrow. Now, focusing a little bit more on Limagrain Ingredient. So the company was actually created in 2002 and is present all over Europe with its offices and its 7 factory and production sites. Our vocation is to create tasty, healthy, nutritional experiences. Using grains and cereals, we develop and produce natural, trustworthy ingredients with distinct functionalities. So now let's go to the heart of the topic. So we will present you our range of functional flours for snack seasoning carriers. But before that, let's take a look at the market trends for snack products on the European market. So there are actually 3 main elements that have an impact on the trends for snack products in Europe, and they are naturality, nutrition, and ethic. So the trend around naturality is of course related to the clean label trend. Nowadays, consumers are looking for clean and clear products that are free from artificial ingredients like additives, preservative, coloring, artificial coloring or flavoring. And this concerns both the pellet and the snack itself, but also its seasoning. So now moving on to the element regarding nutrition. So we know that snacks have been sort of suffering from a negative image in terms of nutrition. However, snacks are now changing and moving towards products with improved nutritional values. And that is thanks to the use of fibers and pulses, but also thanks to the fact that we are able now to produce snacks with a reduced fat content. And finally, so the last one here is related to ethical issue, which is partly and mainly related to the fact that to the decision to stop using palm oil that remains a controversial ingredient. So now I will leave the floor to my colleague Florence, who will present you our carrier solutions.
So hello everyone, I will present you our carrier solution based on functional flour. And maybe just to begin, some words about what is functional flour. To produce functional flour, we associate two parameters, the choice of cereals or pulses, and an heat treatment, a natural heat treatment. And why these two parameters are important, for example, for the selection of varieties, Lima Grain Breeders has created in 23 a new variety of waxy wheat. And some of our functional flour are produced with this variety, which give particular functionality like stickiness. And thanks to the heat treatment, 100% natural process, we will modify the characteristic of the flour. We can modify the particle size, the resistance to abrasion, the starch gelatinization, water absorption. And thanks to these two parameters, with functional flour, we have a clean label ingredient with the declaration flour, but with a lot of functionality. And we will see in the next slide all more details about this functionality. So to develop, to formulate a seasoning for snack, we need some properties. We need to have a good adhesion of the seasoning on the snack. We need to have a good repartition of the seasoning on the surface of the snack. We need to have a good homogeneous distribution of the particle size, good flowability. We want to avoid additives, to have fewest allergen possible, a good microbiology, no dust. And thanks to the functional flour, we can answer all these requirements. We will have a clean and clear label with a simple declaration: wheat flour, maize flour, faba bean flour. So it's very easy to understand the declaration by the consumer. And this functional flour can substitute different carriers that are used today, like maltodextrin, rusk, lactose, whey powder, or also silica dioxide. And with functional flour, we can also have gluten-free solution. That means with a content of gluten below than 20 ppm. So as carrier, we can use different type of flour. We can use wheat flour, maize flour, rice flour, or also pulses flour. And each range has properties, different taste and color. The maize is more yellow, the rice is more white. And we have no gluten for maize, rice, and pulses flour. Wheat and maize can be produced in France with a guarantee, and they are mainly produced by our farmers. So it's very easy to have the traceability of the product. And for each range, we have different functional flour because they have different particle size, different flowability. And according to your needs, we can advise you one or another functional flour. One word about the pulses range, because these carriers are also interesting because they will bring proteins. For example, the level of protein in pulses range is between 21 and 29%. So it can be also a way to improve the nutrition of the snack thanks to the seasoning. So we will speak more about the particle size, and you can see that the repartition of particle size for different flour. For example, the red curve is for native flour, and you can see that we have a large repartition of the particle size. We have a lot of dust, and the particle size are between 5 and 300 micrometers. And on the opposite, we have the blue curves with a very narrow distribution of particle size, and the particle size are mainly between 200 and 400, 450 micrometers. And the size of the particle is a very important element for the flowability of the seasoning. and also to have a good repartition of the spices with the carriers. And due to the pharyngeal process, we have a very low friability. So even after a mixing step with spices and other ingredients, on salt, and all the ingredients, we keep the size of the particles and we don't create dust during the mixing step. And the lack of dust is also very important for the worker safety. So on this slide, you can see the measurement of cohesive index made with TAXT2, the equipment TAXT2. And you can see a big difference between the flowability, the cohesive index of the native wheat flour, more than 2021. And at the opposite, the functional flour, like the waste of wheat TM80 or the waste of wheat H1, have a very good flowability with a cohesive index around 10. So this flowability is due to the particle size, the lack of dust, but also because of the round shape of the particles after the pharyngeal process. And another parameter help to have a good flowability is the low moisture of the functional flour. So you can see the difference of humidity between a native flour and the different reference of waste of wheat. So you can see that some reference like the waste of wheat 100 or waste of wheat H1, we can have a humidity below 10%. So that is important to keep a good flowability and also for the shelf life. Thanks to the pharyngeal process, which is a heat treatment, we also destroy the enzyme like amylase or lipase that can be present in a native flour. So with no enzyme in your carriers, you also avoid a bad reaction between the carrier and active components, or with spices or with the snacks or oil present in the snack. And thanks to the pharyngeal process, we also we have no risk of insect development. Another interest of the pharyngeal process is to improve the microbiology of the functional flour. You can see the difference between a native flour, a dried flour, or waste of range. And if we take just the example of the total plate count, with the native flour, we will be around at 200,000 units per grams. And with a standard dried flour, we can be at around 100,000 units per grams. And with the pharyngeal process, we can have a microbiology which is better with a total plate count below 10,000 units per grams. So in summary, for functional flours, we have carriers which is clear label with a simple declaration. We have different cereals on pulses, so we can have different colors and different tests. We have a good microbiology and no enzyme activity. We can have no dust. We can control the particle size. We can have a good flowability. We have solution for gluten-free request, and we have different packing like bag, big bag or bulk. So we will now see an example of snack seasoning. And in this example, we have two control. One control with just maltodextrin, and one control with an anti-caking agent with silica dioxide. And we have substitute these carriers with two different products, one with rice flour, a simple rice flour, and one with the rice TM optimum. The Rice TM Optimum, it's a new functional flour in our range with a very particle size distribution, and this functional flour has been created specifically for seasoning. So for nutritional information, we can see that with functional flour instead maltodextrin, we will modify the quantity of proteins and the quantity of fibers due to the presence of protein. So in rice, we have a low presence of protein. It's between 6 and 8%. In wheat, we are more between 10 and 11% of protein. And in pulses, we can be between 21 and 29% of proteins. When we change the carriers, maltodextrin by functional flour, we can see also the impact on the declaration. And the first ingredients of the seasoning becomes rice flour. So it's very easy for the consumer to understand the declaration. It's natural, common to have a flour. And you have no anti-caking agent. So the benefits of the functional flour in the seasoning is to keep the flowability and the good dispersion of the seasoning on the snack, to have a neutral taste or on the white color, or on the contrary, we can also choose carriers with a stronger taste, for example, with red bean or with maize. And this carriers is suitable for vegan recipe and for no allergen recipe. And we have a label declaration which is very simple. So we can also compare the cohesive index and the particle size distribution with this 4 recipe, with the 2 control and the recipe with flour, the rice flour, sorry. And so concerning the cohesive index, you can see that with the Rice TM Optimum, we have a better flow, a lower cohesive index than with rice flour and than maltodextrin with silica dioxide. So we will have a better flowability with the Rice TM Optimum than with the control and than with a simple rice flour. And on the left, you can also compare the particle size distribution. And you can see that with the Rice TM Optimum, the green curves, you have the narrowest distribution of particles. So it will be also an indicator for the flowability of the seasoning and the good repartition of the seasoning on the snack. So now we arrive at the time of question. So please do not hesitate to ask your question on the chat or on the question part.
Yes, thank you very much, Florence, for this clear presentation. So as Florence explained, so you have the question tab on the right side of your screen. Do not hesitate to ask us your questions. So we do have a couple of questions. So the first one is, are all of your carriers available as organic certified?
Today, all the references that you have seen in the presentation are not in organic quality. We can develop, we have some, for example, the waste of wheat H1 is available in organic version. We can, after, develop other reference because we have the organic certification for the factory. But I will say it will depend on the volume, because to have a specific reference, I will say that the minimum of volume is around 20 tons per year.
Okay, thank you very much, Florence, for your answer. So we do have a second question. So the second question is related to our solution. So is there any taste differences between your solutions?
Yes, we have difference of taste. For example, the maize and the rice have not exactly the same taste. But for example, when you want to prepare a seasoning for tortilla, that gives sense to use, for example, a maize flour to put on tortilla. You have the same color, you have the same taste. And after, if you want to make a seasoning for popped snacks, maybe it's better based on rice. Maybe it's better to use a carrier that is based on rice or fava beans to have the same color. It will depend what you want. You can play on the taste and the color.
Thank you very much, Florence. We have another question. So the question is, how do you check the good or bad adhesion to the snack base? Dust on application, not slurry.
So sorry, I will. I think that Anne-Sophie could answer better to this question. I know that we have some tests in our laboratory to test the good or bad adhesion, but I don't know this test in detail. So I prefer let Anne-Sophie to answer after. We will send you an email with the description of the test.
Okay, thank you. We do have another question. So the question is, which is the main difference between TM80 and H1, so our solution?
The main difference will be on the particle size. In the TM80, this reference has the narrowest distribution of particle size, and the TM80 is a reference developed with the minimum of dust. We have less, I think it's less than 2% of particle size below 50 micrometers.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will probably take one last question. So it is regarding our, of course, solution. So can you guarantee lower level than 20 ppm gluten?
Usually, when we speak about gluten-free, we guarantee 20 ppm. I know that sometimes we have already guaranteed less than 20 ppm. I think that for specific requests, we already can guarantee 10 ppm or below 5 ppm, but that is a specific reference, and this type of request should be studied with the factory and the quality departments. But it could be possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Florence. And we will take the last question before we end this Q&A session. So the question is, could you share a success story from market?
For confidentiality, it's difficult to share the success story.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see we also have a couple of other questions, but we won't unfortunately have the time to answer to all of your questions. So as explained at the beginning of the webinar, we will get back to you personally with the answers to your question. So thank you all very much for attending this webinar. It was a pleasure to have you, and we hope that you enjoyed it and learned a lot about our solution for functional flour as a carrier. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice day.